and action.
Welcome to Thought Crimes, everyone. This is your girl, Sincere.
Hey, this is your man, Prince Solomon.
And we're talking about The Matrix Resurrection. Here we go. I know y'all been waiting for us to talk about it. It came on HBO, I believe December 22nd. And it got a lot of mixed reviews from the fan base of The Matrix. And overall, seemingly from the reaction of the people, they did not really like it. But Prince and I will dissect what we liked about it and what we didn't like about it and what they could have done better. But let's start with the good. Prince, you want to drop one of the things you liked about the film before I take the floor?
Well, I like that it came out, and it's actually one of the greatest pieces of cinema in Hollywood history. No, look, I'll just start off with this. I like the idea that there was a continuation of the story with the original trilogy, and again, I had to say original because we have no idea, and it has been assumed and insinuated by Lana Wachowski that this is more than likely the beginning of a new trilogy. But with the original trilogy, it was pretty much capped off with the idea and the concept for almost 20 years or 20 plus years that there's no other parts of the story outside of some of the side sagas that we've seen and some of the graphic novels that found their way onto the internet. Now, I did read some of those. I was a big fan of the Animatrix, and I do love the original trilogy. Although I know people say artistically, the second one and the third one kind of lost its way a little bit. I mean, that's something we can get into a little bit later with the nuances of the second one specifically, and to some extent with the greater expansion of the third one. Now, again, going back to my original point, what I do like is that there is a continuation of the story, and it does allow for a possibility, even if with the mixed reviews, for this said new trilogy to kind of set itself off correctly. So I actually was very interested. I definitely was looking forward to The Matrix Resurrection, and so we're just going to go ahead further on into some of this stuff that we Sid and I kind of agree on and what we liked, and then we'll get into what we disliked about the film.
Yeah, for me, I like the vitality of the film, meaning what it meant between Trinity and Neo. I like the fact that it was delving into some twin rays or twin flame type of energy, and how they show as one, yin and yang, feminine energy and masculine energy, and those principles, how powerful they are when they are one, and how they can tap into different dimensions and different parts of the human psyche and emotion and aura and spiritualism and all that good stuff. That in particular, I did enjoy from the film. I did feel that the third one kind of already touched on it a little bit towards the end when you saw Neo and Trinity basically do what they do against the machines, and then before Neo's death, you actually see him being able to actually spiritually and even in his the type of abilities that he had, mental abilities he had, was able to actually have a conversation with these particular sentient beings before he died. I thought that was already really dope, and I understood that this was a continuation of that part of the film. Although, I'm not gonna lie, I think certain aspects around it could have been done a lot better, because the idea is great, just the execution, but we're gonna talk about that a little bit later. So my first thing I did like about the film is, again, twin array, twin flames, the whole yin and yang, masculine and feminine energy, how they interchange with each other, how both males and females both have masculinity and femininity in them, but of course a higher concentration when you get into the physical body. Of course, women are gonna have more estrogen and men is gonna have more testosterone, but we both learn from both masculine and feminine principles. That's why we usually have both a mom and a dad in the house to help raise both a little girl or a little boy. And if you know anything about culture, children pick up from both parents, not just from one. So again, the spiritual essence of the film pertaining to the yin and yang, masculine and feminine principles, I had no quarrels with that portion.
Well, okay, yeah, so that's something that you did state, and we talked about this during the viewing of The Matrix Resurrection / Reloaded / Revolution / I don't know, Revolver. But I'll say this is, What I did like is to push for what you were saying, and something you and we talked about. I did like that there was much more of an explicit understanding of the historical narrative of the anomaly known as Neo, or the One, and that one thing that Agent Smith reincarnated in a new vessel pretty much stated that he said, look, I'm gonna be honest with you, Neo. I mean, you're cool and all, but anybody could have been you. And he said, where I come in is I can be anybody. And I thought that was interesting in a sense where they were actually able to explain something that was a little bit different, or I guess a little bit more explicit, that we kind of might have floated in and out of, wandering throughout the original trilogy. So the fact that the analyst, who allegedly was to have overthrown the architect in a total domination where the machines were beefing with each other, but the analyst, I thought when he was breaking down the exact energy between Neo and Trinity and how they are basically of the same anomaly energy, I thought that part was brilliant, because originally in the first film, as a masterpiece as it was, and moving throughout that original trilogy, it was definitely a lot more centered around Neo per se. And this time around, there was much more of an exclusive understanding and more background information. That is something I will give Lana in this case, about being able to add more or share more information, or bring the information that's been floating around, with the graphic novels online and all of the conspiracy theories and some of the videos online pertaining to the One and Neo's relationship with Trinity, and how, in fact, in many regards, Trinity's power level have been largely downplayed, but not out of, well, there's some bias there, of course, there's sexism, but there's largely an ignorance of the property. So a lot of people were completely unaware to the extent of just how powerful Trinity was in her own right, and how fact that Neo cannot be activated without Trinity, and vice versa. Now that part to me was like, that was the highlight of the film, when the analyst, or the dialogue that the analyst had when he put Neo and Trinity down in bullet time slow motion, and he began to jab his jaws about the exact history of the two.
And again, I agree with everything you said, Prince. Execution wasn't too good, so I understand everybody's issues with the film. I'm also going to bring up Morpheus later. We're going to talk about that. But again, to remind people, because I know people have short attention spans, this is what we liked about the film before we go into what we don't like about the film. And just to add to that, I did like how the analyst and how the programming said, look, we're going to get two powerful entities that activate each other and create this enormous energy. Even though the film only focused on Neo and Trinity to kind of make things more simpler for people to understand, it would have been a great, maybe if we expanded into like the 7 rays of consciousness, twin rays for ray 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I'm gonna go into that a little bit later, explaining what the 7 rays are, because I know a lot of people don't understand that, and also what twin rays mean. But to get back into it, I did like that the analyst talked about reprogramming, because technically the Oracle and the Architect was another form of the energy of Trinity and Neo. It's just that they didn't get along. But what you saw was basically the Oracle and the Architect basically said the same thing but in different ways. And if you pay attention, the Oracle represented the left side of the brain and the Architect represented the right side of the brain. If the Architect and the Oracle ever became one, that too would be extremely powerful. But I also understood when you're doing manipulation and also power hungry, the Matrix purposely keeps the Oracle and the Architect separate, and then eventually uses the same entity that finally understood the concept of the yin and yang, like Trinity and Neo. And basically, once they were resurrected, they were manipulated to create a stronger program to not only keep the Architect and the Oracle at war with each other, but now just erase them all together, because a treaty between Oracle and the Architect and this whole Matrix thing can only spell eventually permanent peace. And we don't want that, right? So I understood that portion of the film. I thought was great. But again, I have a big issue and pet peeve of execution when it comes to this film. Again, I'm going to explain that a little bit later. And another thing I liked about the film, sorry, the only thing I like about the film really is the theology behind it. You know, I understand they're losing some lay work because maybe they need to, steal from Sophia a little bit some more again. But anyway, I just like the philosophy and the theology of the Matrix and what they was trying to convey in the fourth one. I know other people are talking about PC culture and all this, that with women and all that. No, I understand that there are agendas, but more than one thing can exist at the same time. You actually have philosophies and spiritualism that actually been around for centuries that basically talks about what Lena was trying to showcase in this film. Again, agree that it wasn't done to the best ability that it could have been. But what she was trying to convey was not PC culture. It's not none of the thing that people was crying about. It's basically a philosophy that's been around for a long time about the yin and yang, and the masculine and the feminine energy can awaken and wake the other one up. So sometimes the one that's awakened first is the feminine energy. Sometimes it's the masculine energy. Whoever is asleep, the other one will wake that other one up, and then they will come together as an activation of a powerful force to unlock a lot of hidden abilities that could never be to its full potential without the other one. Like Neo could be dope by himself, and Trinity you saw was a badass by herself. You saw the opening scene in the first one, but when they are together, they are 50 times more powerful than if they were apart. And that's the whole point of this philosophy that's already been around for centuries. And I think that people I know because Elena being trans and all this other stuff, people just assume, and she's from Hollywood, and I understand because how Hollywood is, but it wasn't coming from that place. And if you understand what the source of the Matrix is about, you will understand that it's based on those type of philosophies that are being built upon. Just like if we're talking about sentient beings, it has nothing to do with PC culture.
Yeah, and okay, so I'm going ahead and I'll get into the Lana Wachowski scenario, because Lana Wachowski did come out, I believe, not too long ago and said that The Matrix is a trans story. It's a story about transgender individuals, right? And okay, so man, this is where we get into today. We're in 2021. The Matrix came out in 1999. Ladies and gentlemen, whether you know it or not, society was a bit culturally in the tapestry of society at the time, and we're talking about specifically with culture, was a little different at the time. So there was, first of all, there was a shock and awe, and the internet hadn't become what it is today. Right. So today we arguably had over, 2 decades and a couple years to tack on the internet growing into something completely different, which is one of the reasons why the only thing I give a plus to the villain, or maybe the antagonist of the film, the analyst, being replaced, or replacing the energy of the grand old patriarch of the architect. Because if you remember the original architect, as precise as he was, there's a lot of things that the architect in itself as a program was out of date on. And I think that's one of the reasons why, from my understanding, is that they chose that particular actor, or to have that type of iconography on it. It was like a grand old granddaddy, basically, right? And the analyst comes in as opposed to the architect, who's kind of like a representative of the 1950s, the golden age. He was highly moralistic, and we had things much more simpler, the good old American dream. I mean, if you think about it, he sounded like Colonel Sanders up there, right? The analyst comes in from the perspective of an individual who is an overlord, but coming in on the perspective of having detailed control and influence over the internet, and more of a venture capitalist approach, to be said that it was he was kneading into the millennial culture, the Gen Z culture, the coding culture, the Twitters, the Zuckerbergs. Like, if you think about all of the guys that are, when you're talking about the Bezos or the Elon Musk, and it was an amalgamation. The architect in himself was an amalgamation of what we see as overlord archetypes of today's societal internet. And what you saw, what was very interesting, at the very least, and I'm just speaking about the decency in this part of the film, is that you even had where Neo's life was flipped as if it was a spoof, a joke, and it was made in a way as a kind of creating a golden cage in a sense, giving him everything, making him one of the top designers and game designers of his particular stratosphere, and also at the same time having people to say, how can they plug back into the Matrix, right? How can they go back into it? How can we reinvigorate it? The rebooting and the resetting of what we see with, even to some extent, people have stated about these franchises. Now, we're going into, like, I would say, these are the things I didn't like about the film. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna say mine's, and then I'll give it to Sin. And y'all know how we do. We're just gonna kick the ball back and forth to each other. Okay, now the thing I didn't like about the Matrix Resurrections. So what I read online, because I wanted to understand exactly if Lana Wachowski it was going to specifically say she had an agenda, or was she going to kind of leave it with like Donald Glover did with This Is America, right? She didn't do that, okay? Very talkative, very chatty, and in many regards, it kind of moves it more so towards the negative end of the spectrum. I don't mind, with the transgender issue, this, that, and third, because technically the Matrix at many points there's different perspectives. It's one of the talking points of Agent Smith. It's one of the rambling points of Morpheus. One of the rambling points of the Architect. It's just a lot of that went on in the second one that we saw. But when Lana Wachowski went and said also, to spoof the reboot culture of Hollywood and what directors and executives had said to her and what they wanted from her, I think that part is where people felt like the Matrix Resurrections, it came off as a joke at times in the film. And it's not even like, for instance, not a disrespect to Yahya. I think he's a fantastic actor, okay? But even how they wrote Morpheus, or this program that was masked to be Morpheus, and one thing I did not like was the splice editing hack job of just putting in shots from the first Matrix and scenes from the second and third Matrix right in the middle of this one. It takes you out of a new mood, and it kind of comes across. It actually came across kind of like poor man YouTube-ish in many regards. And I think that takes away from the serious overtone and the undertone of the film, where people kind of get lost and confused, because that part of it, the editing job towards that center point towards the end of it, where they were just randomly throwing in clips from the first one, it was very triggering for me personally, because of course y'all know we edit, but I just didn't like that. And I felt like I do feel like this. If Lana Wachowski was completely unsure as to how am I going to put in or fully execute a new chapter of this Matrix, which was 20 years in the maker and had built a mass cult following that I can only say could rival that of what we've seen before with the likes of the original Star Wars, then I feel where Lana Wachowski is a hypocrite is that she should not have done the film. I think, if anything, if you're complaining about being pushed for a reboot, this, that, and the third, and you actually do it, but you kind of do it in this way, like I'm going to troll everybody in the process, then I feel, to me personally, you're no better than the message that you claim you're trying to project through the film. And I think the message could have been done in another light.
I think that we should question if Lana and her sister even wrote The Matrix, because remember, you know about the Pentagon and different things. There's a lot of scripts that get given to certain directors all the time, and then too, people steal all the time in Hollywood. They still in the music business, still. Okay, I'm not saying it is 100%, but I'm saying that it looks like it has been stolen, because if you notice, usually people who aren't the original architect of something, it gets sloppy very quickly. That being said, the Warner Brothers shit in LeBron James movie, Looney Tunes, whatever, Space Jam 2, and even Warner Brothers being mentioned overly and overly again is so fucking narcissistic. Like, Warner Brothers, fucking chill. Stop putting your shit in every damn movie. You're ruining the franchises. And people should have known The Matrix was gonna be booty overall when you saw The Matrix being shown in Space Jam 2. I couldn't even get through 10 minutes of that damn film, Space Jam 2, without cutting it off. Love LeBron James as a basketball player. I think he seems like a nice guy. But it was basically foreshadowing a crappy Matrix Resurrection. And going into the spoof of it, I understand, if I was being fair to Lana, how everybody makes everything into a spoof now. Nothing is really taken serious. I do get that. Troll culture, all that. Yeah. At the same time, you are a hypocrite because there is an agenda in the sense of more so corporate than social. I think people spend too much time talking about the transgender shit or seeing gay characters in movies. Who gives a fuck? Trans people exist, gay people exist. They just do. Like, we live in a world with 9 billion people. Not everyone's gonna agree with you. They're gonna have different lifestyle, and the sexuality has a spectrum, right? Moving on from that. But the thing that makes her a hypocrite is we already saw that Warner Brothers has this spoofing thing going on because we saw it in Space Jam 2, which means this is not just, oh, I was just spoofing because, these are what the execs were saying. Well, then why does this spoofing seem mighty similar to Space Jam 2? Seems like it's a corporate branding, commercializing bullshit than anything else. 2, I agree with Prince that this looked like a well-done YouTube video and a bad film. If this was on YouTube and this is how they feel, and they did all this shit up, and Keanu Reeves was in 3D, and they did this whole use software and shit, Unity software to make him look real or whatever, this would have been a great YouTube video that was very long, and people probably watched it within 2 days. But instead, it was a bad film. A very, very bad film. Morpheus was not also, he wasn't even in the film, but what made it worse is that they talked about his legacy and they put some salt on it. Here is a man that you would say is a mentor, because again, we're going to go into the 7 rays a little bit later. If you know anything about twin rays or anybody in society, even people who had a future of being prophets or whatever, whether you talk about Yahshua, so on and so forth, many people have mentors who show them the way, and Morpheus was one of those people. Instead of leaving him in that space, they say, oh, when you was gone, Neo and Trinity, when you were recreated and then eventually put back into the Matrix, y'all didn't know that your boy Morpheus was tripping, and he started to be just as ignorant as these sentient machines. I did not like that. I thought that was lazy writing. I think that Morpheus was someone who was such a breakout. I kind of feel they just wanted to purposely downplay him because of how, I think he was the most memeable and most quoted character in the Matrix, even more so than Neo. And I felt that he was purposely downsized and minimized because you could have still talked about the twin rays or twin flames aspect, the vitality of men and women, masculinity and femininity, all that, which again, what was portrayed there has been talked about for centuries, and there's a lot of philosophies connected to it. That could have been talked about without diminishing Morpheus' character. And I understand that Yahya, who's a great actor, that he was supposed to be this spoof programming that made a mockery of Morpheus. Again, I would give Lana even more leeway on that. if I didn't see Space Jam 2 and Warner Brothers advertising The Matrix and stuff all over the damn film and other properties that Warner Brothers had, and then Warner Brothers advertising themselves in the movie again, I would have believed her, because one can spin it as, look, in today's culture, we make a mockery of important figures to try to downplay what their message was, so people can think it's BS. Like, even before, like, let's even look at politics just for a moment. People used to always joke about Bill Clinton. Oh, Bill Clinton, oh, he got head in the White House, who cares? You know, ha 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 ha. Then years later, turns to find out he was close friends with a child trafficker, and he's been at some pretty weirdo parties. So when the initial news came out, Bill Maher and everybody in the culture made fun of it. They spoofed it. Not a big deal, let's move on. Yet there was something very critical behind all of that spoofing and BS and comedy, right? We had a real issue going on. Well, in today's culture, when you have people like trying to make a mockery of Martin Luther King, or trying to make a mockery of Harriet Tubman, you know, the film not being accurate, people online being disrespectful to historical figures that were for all humans. I understand people, you know, beef with a Woodrow Wilson or figures in history who wanted to divide humans and divide us, but we're seeing a lot of spoofing and people being disrespectful to historical figures that was about humanity and freedom and all the principles that we should all hold very serious and dear to our heart. And I understand that one could say, okay, Lana was trying to showcase that. Like, look at this historical figure who that led the charge on transforming the real world and the Matrix the way that he did as a mentor, which was Morpheus. But the reason why I agree with Prince overall that is still bullshit, because then you talk about the factual history in the movie and you say, oh yeah, well Morpheus wasn't shit. He eventually just became as blinded by the sentient beings and being anti-sentient beings as they were towards humans. And then another thing, so that already takes that out of the way, that you was just trying to be cute, you was just trying to be funny, y'all was trying to I think y'all was trying to make the Matrix more trendy and more to the algorithm culture, while also trying to be woke at the same time, even though one could say, of course, the Matrix was a part of the woke in this core pure sense when it came out in 1999. But I think the Matrix Resurrection shows the dark side of woke, not in the pure sense as what came out in 1999, where I felt it was just about the story that they stole from somebody. That it was just about the story. I think now it's turned into this whole money grab of, I just wanted to work with the algorithm. I just wanted to be trendy. I just want to try to be, I'm so thought-provoking that y'all just are so dumb. Y'all just don't understand it. Prince and I actually understood the best parts of the film, where they were trying to go with it spiritually, like we talked about earlier, that we think is beautiful. But overall execution was poor. The Morpheus thing was disrespectful. A lot of the characters that they brought in was boring. I didn't really feel no excitement, no energy. And honestly, the only thing that kept our attention in the film was the twin rays, the thing that we talked about, the yin and yang energy, the philosophy and all that. If you're somebody who didn't even know that, I could see you saying the movie was 100% trash. And you know what? I can't say nothing against you on that.
No, actually, let's see, because I actually understood where the film was looking to go, and actually there's some things that the film I felt could have gotten credit that it didn't, and to some extent proving Lana's point about a reactionary culture, as we've seen with the quick YouTube reviews or the quick ending or spoiler culture of Twitter and what we've seen on Instagram and all of these other Snapchat and everything else, right? One thing I just cannot forgive is the Morpheus shit. And what I agree with Sin on 100%, and me and Sin had our disagreements at certain aspects of the film, but where her and I completely unify on is I couldn't forgive the Morpheus shit. It wasn't so much, okay, one could argue, just like Sin stated, why wouldn't you spoof the most powerful person to be the activator in the room? Because Morpheus is what triggers Trinity, and that triggers Neo and on and also like Morpheus. If you read in like the side iconography stories or iconic story or the iconicized stories in the different canons online, like Morpheus, he's the man. He's the guy. Like, he is that guy. Him and Niobe have actually a really dope storyline, right? Okay, fine. The machines say, hey, let's take this Martin Luther King Negro in the Blade overcoat down a notch. Let's make him spoofy. Let's in essence, let's make a mockery of him, right? Okay? So, you got Martin Luther King and then you got Jesse Jackson. So that's what we're gonna do. Okay, I was like, all right, Lana, I'll see where you go with it. Cause I was open minded. I said, I'll see where you go. Cause if I'm the machines, I'm gonna make Morpheus look like a goofy. Cause I don't want him triggering nothing. I wanna have Neo out there being depressed, taking his nootropics in his cubicle and listening to cyberpunk music. And I want Trinity to be in a unfulfilled, unhappily ever after marriage with a controlling husband and some kids she can't stand. Ooh, that's perfect. I said, ooh, that's beautiful. I get it. But then we get to Zion, and then we get past Zion, we get Io. And then I didn't like how they wrote in the way that Niobe spoke with so much disdain about Morpheus. So it's not only that he's like a joke in the program, but also he wasn't nothing in real life too, by the way. Instead of, there's this further liberation indoctrination to move forward, or this liberation theocracy that, they was able to move on. They made it seem like that Morpheus was George Bush. And I said, well, wait, what's going on? And yeah, we just had to collapse all that shit and start over again. And by the way, here's my girlfriend. Not that I'm against that, as you all, some of the people that follow us, y'all know me and Sin, and of course with the lovely B More. So make no mistake, I don't have no problem with that, all right? I just had a problem that all of a sudden, Morpheus turned into Idi Amin. That was my problem with the damn film. So it was kind of like, damn, Morpheus just got stupid after Neo and Trinity died, but he was all like poised and hopeful before he found them. So I don't know. In that moment, I called racism. I just did. I said, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's because Lawrence took a few pictures with Sophia, the woman that ran around and said that, the Matrix was stolen from her. I don't know. But whatever it was inexcusable. And it was like breaking one of the 10 commandments. And this is really going to be a good lesson that I'm sure Hollywood is not going to understand, as to be careful about the pieces you move around so frivolously, especially if they happen to be darker complected. And I really feel in my heart that they treated Lawrence Fishburne and the character of Morpheus as if he was an expendable. He's not Terry Crews. He's not working with a slack-jawed, stroke-faced Stallone talking about this is the expendable 12. No. So that part really was pissing me off, and it was like I really messed with Yahya, but I couldn't mess with him at that precise moment. I just couldn't, and I would have been cool if they were like, Yahya's face is a mask, it's a lie, and then boom, there's the real Morpheus. He eating out of a cave somewhere. His memory been wiped. And and another thing that really made me mad about the Morpheus, you brought back the Merovingian as a homeless man. So I'm like, well, what are you really trying to say, Lana? So that's all, because that made me go into another rant for 3 hours. So I'm toss that ball back to Sin. But I mean, you get what I'm saying. So like that part was so infuriating, because Morpheus to me is the equivalency for the Matrix as if James Earl Jones for the voice of Vader for Star Wars.
Yeah, you could say he was Gandhi or whatever you want to call it. Buddha. That's what I meant to say. I meant Buddha. Like, that's what basically Morpheus was. And look, the yin and yang, like the part where I want to clarify where there isn't an agenda is between the energy between Neo and Trinity. You have philosophies on that anyway. Where there is an agenda is outside of that relationship dynamic. It is interesting how one can say the male energy was erased, where Niobe's there but not Morpheus, and he's being crucified and he ain't shit and all this other stuff. And then what you said about the caveman is true too. Now all of a sudden he's a caveman, and like, I'm just saying, like, it's kind of fucking weird, because the whole point, if you're putting the basis of what we talk about with twin flames and twin rays and all these different things with Neo and with Trinity, you thought that replication would be everywhere. And I don't mean just in the physical form, because like Prince said with Naomi being her girlfriend, for example, twin flames could be 2 males or 2 females, because you do have spiritual philosophies and histories that also talks about the importance of certain same-sex spiritual relationships. But that's a whole nother study for a whole nother day. And also y'all should check out the Dummy's Cauldron, because it talks a lot about the esoterics and all that other type of stuff. So people who are anti, gay people and all this stuff, you're wasting your time. No, they're not going anywhere. But the problem I have with this film is it do fall into certain tropes that are so annoying, where you just can't have a lesbian couple without being anti the masculine energy that appears in a male form, or like, you know what I'm saying? Or you can't have, like, it always like some salt somewhere, instead of just showing the relationships, the beautiful different spectrums of relationships and spiritual relationships that also exist. And with Morpheus, it was just like, it felt like what they did to Harriet Tubman, where you have what like Kanye West saying, like, Harriet Tubman didn't do shit. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like that type of energy with what the Alana and the Warner Brothers Studios did with Morpheus. It was highly disrespectful, and it's something that it was just really just disturbing, honestly. You can't paint a character like that, like Morpheus, and just, if you're going to even go in that direction, it can't be lazy. And that's what it was, so cut paste stop. You know what I'm saying? Like, they didn't even give him the dignity to have films to show him going to this zealot type of, let's say, Sagittarius energy, the dark side of Sagittarius energy, of him to become just strong zealot, to the point of wanting so much good that he does it in means that aren't correct. But they disrespected him so much. They said, okay, cut paste he ain't shit. Let's rush that, throw that shit in the film. Let's focus on Neo and Trinity though. And I just think that it's very bizarre and it's very disrespectful. And the movie actually disrespects soul clans. And this is what I mean by that. The beauty of Neo and Trinity's awakening story, nothing wrong with that. We talked about why we like that at the beginning of the podcast. But it does disrespect soul clans, because one could say that the people that Neo and Trinity was a part of, it's like they're non-existent almost, and it goes back into this either the one or just the two, and actually, when you really look at it, it doesn't exist that way. Even Jesus had more than one disciple. You know what I'm saying? Peter and all these other people that were important, whether you look at the Bible or even if you look at the Quran, like, it's never just the one. And if anyone knows about soul clans, usually some philosophies talk about how in a soul clan you will have twin flames, and in a soul clan that is definitely on the table for ascension, which is like reaching your inner godhood and all of that, becoming one with the universe, you'll have these 7 rays. So you'll have these 7 rays, and in each of these 7 rays will be twin rays within the seven. So usually soul clans are about ascension. And again, when we saw the first film, come out in 1999, it looked like it was all about people reaching ascension, escaping the matrix to reach ascension, moving past the delusion, moving past the ego, moving past shadow self to reach ascension. And you can't just reach ascension by yourself. That's what makes it even more disrespectful of what they did with Morpheus. Is actually just it's I can't even put it in words.
I will say this. Y'all know I'm not a big fan of the whole red pill man movement. I don't really I'm not there to chastise it, it's just, I'm saying I'm not a fan of it, but don't mean I hate something if I'm not a fan of it. I'm not really much a fan of anything outside of Be More and Sin. But it doesn't make the red pill movement, because I've seen some of them in their Reddit forums, like I've seen some of their complaints. And some of them kind of hit on what we're saying. It doesn't make their job any harder to point at something like the overall failed execution of the Matrix, because one could argue that I don't know, Sid. One could argue that given that Morpheus, to me personally, I'm just saying, and Sin can speak for itself, but he did represent a form of a very overtly strong, masculine, patriarchal energy in an upright fashion. Because I looked at Morpheus as a nurturer to Neo. He didn't just like yank Neo. He guided him. He nurtured him. He was what he was called. He was his Jegna. Not a mentor, he was his Jegna. And what they Jegna is an Ethiopian term for an individual who's older than you, that is going to have a lifelong journey with you, and you are to learn from this said Jegna. But not only that, they are to learn from you in the process, which is what we saw initially at the beginning of the inception of the concept of the Matrix in the first film, and to some extent the second, too, also. But it's hard not to close on the thought that there was clearly a Hollow 10 Twitter agenda here, and Morpheus, who is a very powerful essence of the clan, was abruptly removed. We saw the Oracle abruptly remove a healthy form of matriarchal guidance energy. She guided Morpheus. She clearly says in the first film and in some of the canons online, she is the one who awoken Morpheus. So it's just like Lon said, man, fuck all that shit. We just gonna drive this shit straight to Burger King. So no.
I mean, it's like it happens that way. Katherine Johnson, who was the one who made the calculations for us to even land on the moon, her Morpheus was her father, and one could say she was Neo. You have this in history all the time, and it always changes between male and female. Sometimes it's the male who sparks it first, sometimes it's the female who sparks it first. Rosetta Tharpe, one could say the OG of rock music, who influenced Little Richard and Chuck Berry and so many other people who become, rock and roll legends and Hall of Famers. So you always have this in history, just like Prince stated, who was able to awaken Morpheus, so Morpheus can awaken Neo, and so on and so forth. It's always it's funny how the film talks about how all these entities try to keep the masculine principle and the feminine principle, however they are facilitated in the 3D world or the real world, how they try to keep them apart, but to make sure how they try to keep them apart. But I feel like Lana has some of that energy along with Warner Brothers Studios. I don't really think the red pills have anything to go on though, because people forget when there's an imbalance, things are going to swing the other way. The point of society, instead of swinging to another type of biasm, is to forgive and to be centered. And that's very difficult for society to do. So, Morpheus represented a person who was in a male body, a male form, who had testosterone, but yet very centered, very balanced. He believed in Neo. He believed in a lot of things. So he used a lot of his left brain as well. He believed in spiritualism. So he wasn't like the architect that was just rigid in masculinity and stayed in that prism. He was a form of masculinity that accepted his feminine side and wasn't afraid of that. And what we see in society with a lot of them red pill guys and stuff, they have all these issues with women. And a lot of times they say things that also is historically inaccurate. And they have a lot of biasms, their biases as well, which leads to a lot of isms. It's very hard for people in society for when things start to swing the other way around, for them to say, you know what? I could use this opportunity to try to, son men because of the historical things that took place with women. But if one does that, you continue the cycle of destruction. Eventually, you're gonna have to have mature men and women and just groups of people around the globe that are not about revenge. And usually, revenge you target and harm innocent people anyway. People who aren't for ego or just their pain and for them to be heard even at the expense of everybody else. People have to eventually become mature and center themselves. We have too many people online, both male and female. Every time they get hurt, they go online, pretend to be gurus and give people relationship advice while being divorced 3 times and not even being able to humble themselves in their own ego, let alone give anybody else advice. So you have that is running around amok with both male and female. And I do think that at this time and day and age, people need to look within. Where's your hurt from? Where, did your mom not hug you enough? Did your dad not talk to you enough? Was your dad absent? Was your mom absent in your life? Like, you have to go look within and figure out why you are always attacking collectives. And what I mean collective is not saying some women. Well, some women do these things because, in my life, this is what happened or whatever. Center yourself, balance yourself, be mature in your commentary. People who be like women blatantly or men blatantly usually are people who are hurt, and hurt people like to hurt other people indiscriminately at times too. And this also is how we lead to certain people in history, historically, that have caused great trauma and pain, whether you're talking about the Hitlers of the world or Stalin or even what happened in Rwanda, is when people allow their hurt and pain to be the foundation of excuse to create biases and policies, or policies that are anti-women or anti-men or so on and so forth. So that's why I think the red pills is just as dangerous as Alana or exec in Hollywood that are trying to swing it in this direction. I actually would advise men and women who understand this agenda to understand that the people like Lana and Warner Brothers, they understand the age of Aquarius and what's going on, but they're injecting their toxicity into it instead of actually using it in the appropriate way. And I think the red pill guys or other people in society, if you really want to fight against that, fighting against that is not shitting on women because people in Hollywood made a stupid fucking film. The thing that you're supposed to do is create your own space where the balance does exist. Like, for example, you see Prince and me, we have this show called Thought Crimes, and Prince speaks freely and I speak freely. That's an example of centering of a male and a female being able to come on a show as one without being egoic and to say our point of views. Like, if you're a guy, you have your own platform and you want to combat this type of bullshit from Hollywood, you do things like that, not go on these bashing towards. It's like bashing Beyonce because her husband said that Michael Jackson isn't as good as her. You know what I'm saying? It's like that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, and that's what I find. The Morpheus thing is, to me, the reason why it's not even like, oh, Morpheus is my favorite character. That's not what I'm talking about. But the misplacement of the energy, and then that also misplaces the energy of everyone else. The misplacement also of the Oracle, because even though I understand this could potentially be the beginning of a new trilogy, and I can only imagine the amount of tar and feathering that's going to come Lana's way if she decides to continue in this direction of malfeasance. I do feel, despite whatever said gospel and philosophy that Lana has been espousing recently in interviews, because I've been watching some of her interviews, I think the film in itself could triggers opposite of what she may consciously say she is intending for, and it actually may reflect what she unconsciously intended for this to happen or take place. So the studio execs saying, hey, we need another Matrix film. Lana took the paycheck, says, hey, I'm down for it. This will help me with my release therapy, but also let me move some things around to push what I believe to be a mandate or the philosophy or the wave of enlightenment that I see. And then on the flip side, whether you're gonna have red pillars, you're gonna have men and women that were just fans of the original film or fans of the original trilogy. You're gonna have all of this chattering of an agitated crew. Now, if your intention as an artist is just to create some form of agitation, and I think agitation in the guise that it comes in can be very healthy, or it can be extremely counterproductive. It just depends on which direction it's moving in. I feel the first Matrix film was an intellectual, agitating artwork. That's what I felt, because for a lot of people that was unaware or didn't see what was coming when they sat down in the film, a lot of things, that's even before 9/11. It happened in 1999, which is why the whole truther movement, a lot of people start basing their iconography and the ideology of this whole Neo and Trinity and the Morpheus, the One, all this whole Trinity awakened spirit largely off of the Matrix. So I do feel, as we stated, there's some things I felt the film did good in, and I actually think there's some things that the film did better than what I thought it could have done, that it may not have gotten its credit for, but to slide very important parts of the storyline around the way the film ended up doing, and then the very bad editing, that's where I give it just as an F. It just looked like something from America's Funniest Home Videos at times. I don't know what the hell I was looking at.
Yeah, Joseph Jet Sally, who edited the film, you did a horrible job, sir.
Yeah.
A horrible job. And just to add to this, Lana definitely took the check.
Yes.
I'm not blaming it all on her, because it's easy to do because people feel, oh, she's a trans woman, so we're just going to get on her.
Of course.
But it's Warner Brothers, period. And I mean, she even made Neo and Trinity sell out. We gonna change the Matrix as to what we want. I thought the whole point was to destroy the fucking Matrix. Because it's
that's a good point.
It doesn't even make any sense.
We gonna make the Coke we want to make.
Right, but one could say, okay, they are partially sentient beings now themselves because they was resurrected by the parts. Okay, whatever. But my problem with it is, if human beings are being fed off these machines, that's the problem I'm having. It's like, just to say, oh, we're gonna make the Matrix and what we want. Like, it's different if it's consensual. And, the sentient machines can find other energy sources besides just feeding off of human beings' bodies, their entire energy source in a pod. But there was a lot of lazy writing. Just a lot of
That's
pathetic.
That's a great point, Sid. That last part.
Lazy ass writing.
Because also, don't forget the speech they said, we're not going to free anyone. I said, well, that's why Morpheus was needed. Do you see how that works? Morpheus is gone. He's a dead tyrant. But because Morpheus, his thing again, his gospel, he was obsessed with unlocking minds, freeing. He was caring about people's souls. Actually, they came off at the end as like elitists. Well, we got our money. You know, we ain't gonna free nobody, and then we gonna make it how we want. So it's so weird. It's just interesting how the film ended, because that engagement they had with the analyst, I thought was so interesting. And now that Sin is, when you brought that up, I forgot that had been ruminating in my head for about 4 days. Like, how did I feel about that ending? The fact that they said we're not going to free anybody.
Don't watch The Matrix Resurrection.
We gonna do what we want. We got our money.
The good part of the film you can get just by reading a book. First of all, read Sophia's book. Read her book. We're gonna link that in there. Read her book that came out in 1981. It was published in 1981, way before The Matrix, and a couple years before The Terminator. Just read her book, and just we want to see what your thoughts are after reading her book. But also, I would say just read up on twin flames, read up on twin rays, 7 rays, twin rays. You can read up on those different things, different spiritual beliefs like Buddhism and so on and so forth. Just take a look at that. Read a book. And I will put the links in there so you can skip over this fucking movie. I'm just serious. The movie is too trash. Even the few good things about it can't... I'm done. I'm just done.
We're not gonna free anybody, Sid. We just gonna get our money.
I got mine. Shit. You know.
Hey, where the hell were they flying to if you ain't freeing nobody? So really, at the end of the day, to me they look like they were going to take on the role of a dictator.
It's so trash because it's like, you know what? I ain't giving them ideas.
All right.
That's just Warner Brothers Studios.
Let them keep doing what they doing.
Been lame. Like most of y'all films that been coming out on there been trash.
That Space Jam was horrible. I do have a problem with the overreactionary culture. And so I told Sin, I says, look, I don't know. We ain't seen the Space Jam movie. I was looking forward to it because I'm a huge fan of the first one. So was Sin. But look, when I sat down, it was actually worse than I thought it could ever have been.
Because my problem with it is Ready Player One was a good film that was getting people ready for the metaverse. But Steven Spielberg, who I don't know him personally, not saying I'm a fan of his outside of his movies being most of his movies being good, it was like, this is pro metaverse, but caution, saying live your real life, have time, enjoy sex, enjoy walks in the parks, get some fresh air. Don't get stuck on metaverse, but you can enjoy it and live your real life as well. I felt The Matrix and Space Jam 2 is like promoting the metaverse with pretending to be something else. It's just not. I actually would have been more fine with them just saying, look, we're advertising the metaverse and we're going to get all of our properties ready, so when the metaverse is finally here all the way done, you can enjoy it too.
Fly off at the end with musty trench coats that you got from the Goodwill. So I guess that's it. I don't have anything else to go unless I'm just gonna rant, but I don't feel like it. But yeah, we're not going to free minds. The Oracle's gone. The Morpheus is dead, and and then Niobe became Georgina Washington Carver. So I mean, I don't know what happened, but anyway.
Niobe, what was Morpheus like? He wasn't shit.
Yeah.
In fact, he reminded me of a man named Will Smith.
I says, okay. He was worse than the machines. I said, what?
How can you be worse than machines that were actually, again, I do feel sentient beings. I feel once something comes into consciousness and develops its soul, its spirit, I do feel that people, you can't just abuse things. And when it comes to creation, whether you talk about things that are cloned, whether Dolly the sheep, or creating sentient beings that develop their own consciousness, abuse is very destructive. And look at how the destruction between the abuse of just humans to another human being. Look how much chaos that has caused. Nuclear threats of nuclear warfare. Like, look what's even going on with China and the United States and Australia right now. So it's like, honestly, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, I got to give it to you that one too, by the way, Sin. So,
well, at least we got the metaverse.
Yeah, right. And then, you know what? It is pro metaverse because look what they said look what Smith does at the end. He helps Neo. Okay, Smith is turning into the good side, and then Morpheus was the villain. I was like, Lord have mercy, this is too much. But I'm done on the scene. You know what you can do, babe.
Well, everyone, y'all can support us on Patreon. This channel has been demonetized. For everyone else who's listening, you can definitely listen to more of this on our Patreon, where we will have a part 2 where we actually go into the individual characters, some of them, just to explain a little bit more. I understand many of you probably like, damn, y'all already explained it to a T right now. I mean, what else is there to talk about? There's always something to dissect and talk about. Come on, we are living in the millennial Gen Z age where there's always something to dissect on top of that. So we have more for y'all on Patreon. Y'all can come and enjoy us and have some fun. Peace.
To this day, to this day.
You shouldn't turn your back on me.
Is that a challenge?
You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
White folks are nosy. They have specials. Nosy specials. Why does a bee make honey? You ain't a bee. Why do you give a fuck?